Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome if you're new. In today's video we're going to be reviewing my 2-week warm weather training camp in Portugal, whether it's a success, whether I would recommend it, will I be going back again next year, and also why I chose it over going to say something like an altitude camp when it seems to be quite fashionable at the moment to go to altitude, Font-Romeu, Poch in South Africa, Flagstaff, Arizona. Why did I pick to go to warm weather training camp over an altitude training camp? So let's get into this.
Home straight's cold running, coming in fast and the others have nothing. Run it like it is, ain't no pushing and shoving when the big dog barks and the other men are ducking. On the home straight it's cold running, coming in hot, he's about to show you something. Speeding through the line, didn't give you a chance, then I'll see you for your massage when he's whooped your ass. Big dog, bad dog, gonna make you mad dog.
So guys, I went and spent 2 weeks in Albufeira in Portugal. It's pretty warm, it's pretty isolated in terms of the location, but it's absolutely perfect for running. There was runners everywhere, athletics as a whole really. There was field events, jumping, decathletes, heptathletes, but predominantly runners. It was just the ideal training location. Plenty of trails, a track right next to where I lived, plenty of areas to chill out when you weren't running. There was a gym, a pool. So yeah, it was basically just the perfect environment with as little distractions as possible so that I could focus and actually fall in love with running again. The weeks before the training camp I had been struggling with motivation and kind of wondering why I was doing the running. And one of the things that this camp has really helped me realise is that I listened to way too many podcasts on runs. So then when there wasn't a new episode of a podcast to listen to, I basically was regretting or not looking forward to the run. So over the 2 weeks I didn't listen to a single thing on runs. It was simply running by myself or running with other people and having chats with people, and it's made me kind of really look forward to running again, and that's one of the best things that I could have hoped for coming from this trip. So yeah, so that's one of the main benefits that I found from this trip. It gave me somewhere where there's no distractions other than waking up, eating, run, relax, run, eating, sleeping. That was pretty much it. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So while I was out in Portugal, I did run 2 100-mile weeks. Now this is the first time that I've ever hit 100 miles for a weekly mileage, and then I did it twice back to back. Now the reason I did this was basically because in my normal life I don't have the time to relax or recover as well as I would hope. But while I was on this training camp, basically whenever I wasn't running I was sitting, and whenever I was sitting I was able to use things like a massage gun, I was able to use recovery boots. So overall it's just the perfect environment, pretty much living like a professional athlete, and that's why I would so highly recommend it. If you're someone that really loves to run but maybe your job gets in the way, having a running holiday like going to Albufeira in Portugal, there's plenty of other kind of options that you could choose as well, but this is obviously the one that I sampled. It's just such a great opportunity to get away from all the distractions of life, kids, wives, husbands. No, I'm joking, take your family with you. Yeah, it was just absolutely perfect to focus on the running, doing the right things at the right time, making sure I was fueling properly, recovering properly, and yeah, I've come away with it. 2 weeks, 100 miles each week, no niggles, obviously touch wood, they could still come. So at the moment it seems to be pretty fashionable for people to travel to high altitude camps where you can work at that higher altitude, which kind of the lower oxygen level will trigger your body to produce more hemoglobin, more red blood cells, so you can transport oxygen more efficiently. So what is the benefit to going to something like a warm weather training camp? So for starters, there's a much shorter acclimatization phase. So I got there, maybe had 1 day of chilling out, doing an easy run, and then I was pretty much acclimatized to the humidity, the warmth. Whereas at a high altitude camp you would need to take a couple of weeks to adapt to the oxygen levels before you can start actually training properly. So overall, if you want a shorter stint of a holiday, so we did 2 weeks, 2 weeks is going to be way too short for something like an altitude camp, but for our warm weather training camp it was absolutely perfect. So we only took kind of 1 day to acclimatise, and then we started getting on with our normal training. Another reason is that when you're then not training, there's so much more to do. It was warm, so we could sit outside, play games outside, go to the beach, go for walks. Whereas if you're somewhere that's high altitude, it's typically very cold. Something like Font-Romeu, for example, it's going to be quite cold up there. So what are you going to be able to do when you're not running? Maybe it's going to be staying indoors a lot more. I guess you could kind of go outside a little bit if you've packed for the right weather, but again, you're up mountains, so is going to be going to be hindering your training a little bit, potentially. I don't know, I haven't experienced it. But yeah, so there's a lot less to do in terms of your time outside of training. And also, one big thing that I always struggle with over the summer is adapting to the heat. So last year I did the Highgate night of the 10Ks, and one of the biggest things that impacted me was the heat. So getting out for 2 weeks over a period of time in England where it's actually a little bit chilly, I've now come back, had 2 weeks in the sun. I'm now kind of 2 weeks ahead of people, if you like, in terms of adapting to that heat. So now when the heat does come to England, it hopefully won't be as much of a shock. Again, touch wood, hopefully it works like that. Another reason why warm weather training camp was chosen over an altitude training camp for us Canterbury Endurance guys is that you get a lot less injuries while you're out in a hot weather training camp than altitude. The low oxygen levels can trigger things like just simple injuries that maybe you wouldn't have sustained in the heat, as long as you're obviously drinking a lot to keep up with those extra sweating levels.
Hi there.
But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not a sports scientist, so again, some people might say that altitude camps are better, but for a 2 week stint, I think a warm weather training camp to Portugal was just the ideal thing. It gave me no distractions, able to get out there and focus on my training. Another thing that I found by going to a really nice warm weather training camp, such as the Albufeira camp that we went to, was that the food was really good. So when I'm running a 100-mile week, fueling is so important. So one thing that I really focused on was actually just enjoying my food, because if I can't enjoy my food while I'm running 100 miles a week, when can I? So basically every day was a nice dessert, a big waffle with ice cream, something like that, just to make sure I was putting those calories back into the body so I could get up the next day and train. Every morning was the same, really nice, getting up, getting my porridge every day religiously with my coffee, ready to go, and getting out the door, going out onto what we called the horse route, which was this lovely little dirt track area. Basically, if there was a route that you needed for something out in where we were staying, it was there. If you needed the track, it was there. If you needed a long flat route for some tempos, there was that. If you needed some hills for a hill session, there was hills. It just had everything you needed. Even if you wanted to go do some sand training, there's the beach right there. But I do have a tiny fear of sharks, so so if you do catch me running into the sea, do not shout hammerhead shark like Chris did, which was not very nice. But here's a little clip. I don't know if I got it caught on camera exactly, but basically I ran into the sea. Chris played a little prank on me, shouted hammerhead shark, everyone else started turning and running, and there was me just kind of stood in like shock. I was like, I didn't know what to do. So yeah, cheers Chris. That is one thing I guess of high altitude training, you're not going to run into any aggressive sea animals. But yeah, the whole trip overall cost me around £500 with flights and accommodation, and for a 2 week stint in Portugal, I mean, I don't really know too much about exotic holidays, but I don't think that was too bad, especially because we did book the flights pretty late in the grand scheme of things. So overall, I think 500 quid was an absolute bargain for what I've achieved out of it. I've done 2 weeks falling back in love with the sport that I'm really passionate about, and learnt a lot more about myself, and especially my relationship with food and my mental health, etc. Out in Portugal, where you're surrounded by so many good athletes and you see what their kind of habits and their rituals are when it comes to eating and recovery, you realise actually that maybe you are doing things right, and maybe just some things don't always go the way you expect, and just because you're not kind of hitting those heights that the elite athletes, those pro athletes are hitting, doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. It just means that maybe they're naturally a little bit more gifted, or their genetics help a little bit more, something like that. So as you guys know on this channel, I've always struggled with my relationship with food, but I was always seeing other elite athletes, professional athletes at the same cafe as me, eating the same desserts that I was. So yeah, so if I'm gaining weight as a result of that, it just comes down to genetics. So I've learned a big thing about myself and the way I react to food, and the way I react to kind of running solo, especially when there's other guys doing that as well. Bit of waffle, pardon the pun, did eat quite a lot of waffles. I would 100% highly recommend it. Do some research, find some good warm weather training camps, go out with a group of friends. On the same area that we were staying, there was this huge group of Irish athletes, between 40 and 60 year olds, and they'd be coming out and doing yoga on the grass. They'd be going out for group runs in the morning, all kind of 40, 50 of them. So yeah, it was absolutely incredible seeing lots of different runners, meeting other runners, and it was just like a town of runners. I barely ever saw people that like I hadn't seen running at some point, basically. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope you've enjoyed the series of the Portugal training camp vlogs. I did end up not vlogging the second week purely because I just found having to edit the next day's vlog a little bit stressful. I'm not quite as good at editing as I would hope, or as I would like to be. So the whole editing process was a little bit slower, and it was actually taking away from my day. But yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to wrap up this vlog. My final thing for this video is my race announcement. I have booked on to a race in May. You guys have seen me do it before. It's the Highgate Night of the 10Ks in Highgate, obviously. That is the 20th of May, 10K round the track. The best event I have ever done, hands down. You'll know from watching the videos that last year didn't quite go to plan for me, and this year I'm hoping that it will go a little bit better. Unfortunately, this year they did have a quicker cut-off time, so you had to be sub 32 this year compared to last year where you had to run a sub 33 10K. But I did email the organisers and they've been very nice and let me into the sub 32 race. So I probably am the slowest on paper because the only time I'd done in the catchment area was 32.17, which was a road one where I kind of gave up. So yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Really, really looking forward to it. Thank you for all the support on the channel, and a massive thank you again for helping me hit 5,000 subscribers. And yeah, hopefully some cool vlogs coming up. I will be at London Marathon, hopefully, going up to watch. So yeah, please like, subscribe, share with your own buddies, and if it's easy, then what's the point? I'll catch you in the next one. Bosh.